Not seeing anybody online just yet. I'll go ahead and say it, and we can fill Kayla in just a minute. So, your challenges, these aren't things that are like,
Good morning, Grayson High School. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty and justice for all. City announcements. Get ready for homecoming. Jesus homecoming will be the week of return from fall break. That means court nominations need to be done this week. Look for announcements and make plans for Spirit Week. Thank you, Grayson High School. Have a great day.
that's,
So they do the homecoming dance or just the game?
I guess, just the game at the moment. I don't know about dance yet or not. Should be interesting one way or the other. All right, so we'll fill Kayla in when she gets back in. Your challenges, these are just ways to win like house points for your class, for your house and all of that good stuff so that you get the bonus points at the end of the year, at the end of the semester, and so that you maybe get a party and all that. But tomorrow night is the presidential debate, the very first one. It may be the only one. We'll have to see what happens. But if you watch it and take a picture of yourself and post it in the discussion right here, and then tell us one thing that you found interesting about the debate, then you get 15 house points. But just a way to encourage you guys to watch it because it should be fairly interesting. Plus, you guys will be voting not in this election, but in the next one. So go ahead and start paying attention, all that good stuff. If 2020 hasn't done us in by that point. All right, here we go, guys. So let's go ahead and get started. So phones up for the time being. I'm just going to go through and explain this to you guys. So this week, and I don't have your your Thursday, Friday thing up yet because I don't know. I want to see how we do as far as time-wise goes for this project first. All right. So we did immigration last week and the week before that, really. We've talked about the labor movements and we've talked about industrialization. So this week and probably into the week after fall break, we're talking about the progressive movement. So what does it mean to be progressive? Taking steps forward, all right, that's correct. What do you guys think it means in the context of reform movements? Like what now? Yes, that's one of the progressive movement things that happened. What else? Better working conditions. That's another one. There's two or three more big ones. So you've got women's rights, you've got improvement in working conditions. Industrial revolution is what's going to lead to the progressive movement. Because think about it, you've got these big industries coming in, and all of you guys were immigrants last week. Did you guys have good working conditions and all of that? No, right? So this is going to be the startup of those movements because you have these huge companies and these huge corporations come up, and they start. This is like really where the idea of the evils of capitalism come from, because this is before we had any kind of regulation on corporations or big businesses. So you had these individuals who got super, super rich and would create a monopoly over everything so that nobody else could enter into that sphere of whatever development they were doing. But the progressive movement is the steps forward. We think about progressive today as what? What is the progressive movement today?
Like
Better working environments. For who? Who? For minorities. That's a big one. There's a huge one that we talked about all the time these days. It gets through. Do what? Women. What about women? They are allowed to work. Well, that is part of it. Equal pay. That's what I was fishing for. That is technically part of the progressive movement as well. But today we talk about women's rights being abortion. We talk about it being equal pay and equality in the workplace. That's what the progressive movement is today. It's also LGBTQ rights. It's the progressive movement is individual rights. I want to say it without sounding political, but there's really no way to say it without sounding political. It's the ideas of how do we help the collective move forward, if that makes sense. All right, so the progressive movement at this time, we still have women's right. We get women's suffrage, right to vote. Who else doesn't have the right to vote, really and truly? Minorities, right? How are minorities kept from voting at this point? We do still have segregation. So it wasn't necessarily that you had to pay, it was Jim Crow laws, which they set up to keep African American and other minority groups from voting. I think there was a poll tax that you had to pay, but I can never remember the exact particulars of that. We'll get into it when we talk about the social movements, which will be the week we get back. Right now we're going to talk about federal reform movements. So you've got minority and African American rights being pushed through the progressive movement, women's rights being pressed through this. You've got workers' rights, labor unions coming up, and you've got this idea of busting trusts, so busting big monopolies. One other big one that we think about, if we, I'll give you guys a hint. If we, let's say Zach owns a farm, okay, and he owns a cattle farm, and me, Bryn, and Kayla are like, all right, we are going into work together, and we're going to start a meat packing industry. There are no regulations yet, right? What's our factory going to look like? How so? It will be nasty because do we care about cleanliness if we're just trying to make stuff as quick as possible? No. All right. Let's say it's Joseph, right? Jackson. Dang it. Getting closer. So say Jackson then comes in and is like, man, this place sucks. Look at it. There's like rats everywhere. There's maggots in the meat, and they're just producing this and then selling it. So what's he going to do? Say he's a reporter. What is he going to do? What do you think the world's going to think? You think they're going to buy our product anymore? No, right? So the world, but now that's every single meatpacking industry, right? So the Pure Food and Drug Act is the other big one. It's going to be regulations within these industries that service the public. So anything that when you think about FDA approved beef, like when you go to the grocery store and you see a little pack on that, that's what the Pure Food and Drug Act is going to do. So those are our big progressive movements. If you look at this right here, these are the pages. I don't like the Pearson textbook so much on this, and it goes upside down for whatever reason. It uploaded wrong, but all of the book pages are here for you guys to read on each of these. Hold on. And then if you don't want to have to scroll through it all, when we actually get to what we're about to do, they're all here as well in like little small images. So up to you guys how you want to read it. But these are the book pages. So it's going to talk about, we'll talk about the captains of industries, which were Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, which I know you guys have most likely heard of. They both had huge businesses and they had monopolies in their respective fields. Carnegie was steel and Rockefeller was, I think he was what? Yeah, I think he was too. One of them was something in railroad. I think maybe that was Carnegie Steel. I think Vanderbilt. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Thank you, Jackson. So those three, Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, and Carnegie, had monopolies over their respective industries. What happens in a monopoly? Are smaller businesses able to come up if somebody has a monopoly? No. All right. At this time, do we have any kind of regulation of monopolies? No. All right. But are they progressing the nation? Carnegie, Steel, and Vanderbilt. Kind of how so? Very good. Okay, so if on one side of it you have, Kayla, you are a business owner last time, right? All right, like you own a very small steel manufacturer, okay? And Jackson is going to be our monopolizer. All right, you're going to be the captain of industry. All right, so you're going to be Carnegie. All right, you have a monopoly over absolutely everything. You can provide a whole bunch of jobs for Bryn, not Noah, but Zach and me. The three of us are like, hey, we have jobs. We're happy. We're working for Jackson, right? We get paid. We get to go home. Even if we're immigrants, we're making decent money. The world is progressing, all right? Are we happy, the three of us? We three workers? All right, Kayla, are you happy? Right, how many workers do you have right now? Yeah, you have, well, right now you have 0. I'm sorry, because and that's just because there's nobody else in the classroom for me to use them as an example. Right now you have a big 0. You're going to have a lot of trouble competing against Carnegie over there. All right, so as everyday Americans, do we necessarily care about this? No, but what about people like Kayla? They care, right? So do you think there's going to be kind of some back and forth on this? Right, even though when we look at it from like today and we look back on it, we're like, man, monopolies, obviously that's stupid. We have to be able to break those. But at the time, people didn't see that, right? You got paid the money that you needed to live your life and the world progressed. Think about in the terms of like Facebook, YouTube, and Google, right? Is there another good source other than YouTube for videos? Do what? Right. There's not there when you think of I need to go look up a video, where's the first place you go? Is YouTube, right? There's no competition there. All right. But does YouTube have a monopoly? Can YouTube have a monopoly? Do what? Hang on, we'll get there. All right. So YouTube kind of has this sphere, right? But is it a good that we buy? Is it a good you have to buy? How about that? No, right? You can go to other, like you can maybe go to Netflix and watch something. You can go to Hulu and watch something, right? So it's got a monopoly in kind of a public sphere and that has rules and it is a community, but is it technically a commodity that we buy? Generally, no, right? Okay, let's go to Google. What kind of a monopoly does Google have? No, that's good because does anybody ever say I'm going to go Yahoo something? No, right? Do you ever say I'm going to go Bing that? No, it's you Google it, right? Google has almost the entire virtual world, Google has the topmost say in everything. All right, and that means that if you are a larger corporation like Amazon, your ads and your topics are going to be at the very, very top, right? But what if you're something smaller like Etsy or eBay? Those had a harder time coming up because they have to fight off large corporations like Amazon. But how do you break a monopoly of something that isn't technically a commodity that you buy? Does that make sense? So like steel and oil, yeah, because at the time, steel and oil are so big, right? They go into every other thing. Amazon is so large right now that all other companies can push up into Amazon and still make money. So how do you define what a monopoly is at this point? Because as everyday people, we don't care, right? The world is progressing, we're getting what we need. But smaller business owners are the ones who are going to say, hey, this is wrong. How do we combat this? And it gets harder these days because, and Amazon probably will eventually have some kind of monopoly legislation moved against them just because they are so gigantic. But it's a little bit harder to define than this. But something like, I think Disney even. Disney owns everything. Yeah, they own ESPN, they own Fox. Well, no, they don't own Fox. 21st is still itself. They own Marvel. They own a lot of old Warner Brothers things they own these days. Disney is everywhere. ABC, CBS, MSNBC, Disney. All right. Can you quantify that as what, like a monopoly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you can't to the extent of this because this is a commodity that we can physically buy, right? We as the common people don't necessarily care about it, but I went off on a tangent, I'm sorry. It's harder to define that as a monopoly, right? But it is similar in the fact that these are gigantic corporations that other people don't really care about as long as they're getting paid and as long as they're getting everything they need. The problem with that, and the problem that we as workers start running into, is that these big industries don't have any kind of regulations on working hours, on cleanliness. There's no labor restrictions. So Bryn, was it you who had a child who lost a leg the other week? Yeah, so like Bryn's children are maybe 7 or 8 years old and working in a factory, and there's no safety regulations for them, right? And then you fast forward to these days, and if you're a kid, you can't work. So that's what all of this is going to lead to. These large industries are going to lead to this progressive movement on the federal level, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about, or we're going to deal with today. We're going to deal with captains of industry, the idea of social Darwinism and trust busting, and then political reform is still on there, and then labor unions. I think that's the last page for this week, or for at least for today, because the rest is going to be environmental reform, social reform with equal rights and women's suffrage. And then, okay, we're going to talk about this one too, which is Upton Sinclair. Have you guys ever heard of Upton Sinclair?
Heard of the name, but exactly what?
So he's the one who went in, if you were the reporter earlier, he's the one who went into the meatpacking industries and found out just how disgusting they were. And he wrote what's called The Jungle, which if you've never had to read The Jungle, be very, very thankful. If you ever have to read it, I'm so sorry. We had to read it when I was in 9th or 10th grade, I can't remember. And then again in college. It's intense. And The Jungle is like going to be this huge eye-opener for regular people who don't work in the meatpacking industry, because people care about what they eat, right? Like, you may be hungry, but you probably have limits, generally speaking. Yeah, very early 1900s. Well, this is what led to the
I
regulation.
know, so like, I understand why that's something with the impact. And,
Yeah, wait, say it again.
like, I something, I mean, you guys see the island, and the island, see the impact on a social standpoint.
Oh, if you were to read it today?
Yeah,
Yeah, well, it's disgusting.
yeah.
That's like it turned me off of pork for a really long time. You don't want to know. If you were ever one of the people who have to read, I'm really sorry if you have to read it. It's just, it doesn't make a social impact today because we know that there are regulations on it, the Food and Drug Act and all of that. But if you go through and have to read it, it's not a good read. It's not like sitting down and reading, like a comic book or Harry Potter or something like that. I hope you don't have to read it ever. But it's good. And then this is the women's right movement. Okay, so those are the pages. These are book pages. And we went off on a couple tangents because I don't know when to control myself on talking. Sorry. What you guys are doing today? All right, so you have this document, it's called document 4 down here because it refused to upload correctly. So I just, once it uploaded, I said, forget it. Yeah, okay, and it didn't upload the graph, so by about midnight last night, I was like, screw it, we're done. So this is what you guys get, I'm sorry. But you and your house group, you guys remember what house group you're in? You're not in one yet, so I'll have to hook you up. If you've forgotten, it is over here under resources and groups, US 11. So that tells you which group you're in. If you've forgotten, which is possible because let's be real, this class is not going as smoothly as my other classes because if you can't tell, this is my first time teaching 11th grade. This one. So all my stuff isn't quite as organized. All right, so if you are Gryffindor 1, you are researching the Sherman Antitrust and the Clayton Antitrust Acts. Most of these you can find on those pages. You may have to do a little outside research, but it ain't that deep, you know what I mean? You've got Sherman Antitrust and Clayton Antitrust if you're Gryffindor 1, if you're Gryffindor 2, Pure Food and Drug Act. Slytherin 1, you are Department of Labor. 2, Federal Reserve Act. If you're a Hufflepuff, you have the 16th and 17th Amendments. Hufflepuff 2 is the 18th. Ravenclaw 1 is the 19th, and then Ravenclaw 2 is Workers' Reform Movement. When you come over here, you have, you're finding out the who or the what of whatever it is. You guys all have the dates for the most part, with the exception of the amendments and the Workers' Reform Movement, which is, I guess the Workers' Reform Movement made it on here. Well, that's great. Well, I'll fix that. Okay. You guys all have the dates for that. And then what I want you to look at is what caused these acts to be passed. So like for the Pure Food and Drug Act, the meatpacking industry corruption, Upton Sinclair's book that came out, those are causes of it. What are the effects of it? And then you'll have to research, okay, how did that change that industry, or how did that change and break down monopolies? Does that make sense? Yeah, I would say try to get 2 causes and 2 effects for each one, which really for all of them except for the 16th and 17th Amendment, that's going to be really easy. And the 16th and 17th Amendments go hand in hand. So if you're that one, it's pretty straightforward. Then what you're going to do is you take the information you get from the documents and you make a poster for it. So 2 pictures on it, and then tell us who or what it was, put the date on there somewhere, and then put your causes and effects for it. Does that make sense? It is a virtual poster. You are working with the rest of your group on it. If you don't, let's find your groups. since you guys are the only ones technically in here and nobody else has popped up online.
I don't think I'm on that paper, but when I took the quiz, it said I'm on.
You're Hufflepuff. Are you not on here? You were one of my later students to pop in, weren't you?
Yeah, I came in like 2 or 3 weeks late.
Yeah, okay. You're probably not on here then. I'll have to fix it. Because I think there's a few people that are on here that have vanished. Yeah, you are. Look at you. Kayla Johnson, there you are. Zach, what's your last name? There you are. Zach, you're a Ravenclaw. You're in group 2. Ravenclaw 2, so you're worker reform movement. Brandon said you were a Hufflepuff. Let's put you in group 1. And then Jackson, we'll put you in Hufflepuff group 2. And your 3 people are actually very active in class.
I know Emma.
Huh?
I know Emma.
You know Emma?
Yeah.
Akasha and I think it's Eliza. I couldn't tell you how to actually pronounce. If you're listening to this, Eliza, I'm so sorry if that's not how you pronounce your name. My bad. But all 3 of them are very, very good and responsive.
I don't know if it's Justin, but I know Justin's been down.
You know Justin Bell? Justin may not be in here anymore. I can't remember.
I just don't live in this.
Yeah. All right, but this is your group. So if you know your group people, and do you know anybody in your group, Kayla? You don't know anybody in your group? All of your group has been turning in their work, so they will be responsive. That's a good thing. I will send out one, and I'll send out something in the group. Are you in the group me? You are. Are you in the group me? Okay. Are you in the group me? We'll find out.
I know everybody except one person in my group.
Okay. Where are you? So you know Zane and Ramel. You don't know Zoltan. If I'm mispronouncing y'all's names while I'm reading this, y'all, I'm so sorry. But we haven't met face to face for the most part.
Does my group turn in their work?
Daniel or Zach Hunter. He's very active.
It's that,
Yeah.
because he
It's Zach.
literally has my name except it's a H and he's like this tall.
Zach, I'm
He's an
sorry.
idiot.
Zach, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Everybody in your group, Kayla, they've been responsive. I think pretty much everybody who is in here right now has a group of people that is super responsive. So that's good. You guys are not in a troublesome group. But what I would do is I would just shoot. I think you can shoot out messages to each other through Schoology, can't you?
I don't know. I think my brother should do.
Yeah. I'm going to send something in the group me here in just 2 seconds to say, hey, y'all, check your groups, check the PDF because you guys are working together on this. Y'all, it's super easy. Obviously, it's not going to be a hard project, but this is our first one where we're actually all working together. So,
Is anyone watching this video?
no, nobody's on the Zoom call.
Oh.
I thought Zach was going to come because he messaged back, but here we sit.
Wait, Zach's in this actual class.
Everyone on the list.
Everyone on the list in this class.
Why are there so many? Why? There's not even enough desks.
Everyone's manually.
There really aren't enough.
The only person that I don't like in my group is him, because he does absolutely nothing. He'll
You
just
know-
sit there.
This is a recording.
You know, I had him in a group all of last year. He sat in my group. He sat right next to me.
We'll cut this
He
part.
literally just sit there and stare at you.
We'll cut this part. I can fix that.
He literally stayed there.
Let me just go ahead and stop